Hello, DawgNation, and welcome into DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell. We've got Connor Riley in person today. The other day, Connor, someone hit me with a college football type trivia question that I was not prepared for. I feel like you could absolutely murder this, though, so I'm going to give it to you. The question is, there are 5 schools that have produced both a U.S. president and a Super Bowl winning quarterback. You don't have to tell me who the president or the players are. You just have to give me the 5 colleges. Just for while you think, I can only get 3 of the 5.
Okay, so the most recent addition to this, I believe, is Delaware with Joe Biden and Joe Flacco.
Crushed it.
Stanford is John Elway, Jim Plunkett are the Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, and Herbert Hoover is the president. The Naval Academy, obviously, there's a long line of presidents that have been there, and then Roger Staubach is the Super Bowl winning quarterback. Michigan, Gerald Ford, Tom Brady. And the one that most often trips people up is Miami of Ohio, where Ben Roethlisberger and William Henry Harrison is the president who attended that school.
I mean, you have to have seen this before, right?
I have, yeah.
Okay, that makes me feel a lot better because I had hints and stuff ready, like in case you didn't. But I mean, you made that way too easy. That's what's crazy about this show is you never know what you're gonna get from Connor here on DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
You would think at this point I would have learned my lesson with trying to give Connor prompts or questions. He always seems to do so well. So I think maybe this is the end for me in all of this, and I should start putting a lot more faith into Connor. With that, let's just go ahead and move on to what we've got going on today's episode. Starting with, we're going to go through the entire 2025 schedule and give our predictions because the season is going to be here before we know it. Then we'll do our Dog Bite segment. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be focusing on the classes and who are the most important people in those. So today we'll start with the seniors for the class of 2022. Then we'll follow it up with our favorite memes of the week. And in honor of Survivor 50 starting to shoot, we're going to do 3 people that we think could actually win the game of Survivor. More on that later. We got to go by these games pretty quick. So let's just go ahead and start with Marshall. And I'm about to do some real girl math. You're going to have to stay with me on this. The way I view this Marshall game is almost what it's like when I play pickleball. When I'm playing a really, really good opponent, I just get really nervous and I don't want to take risks because I just feel like the margin of error is so small. But when I play an opponent that I know that I have better talent on my side, I tend to just play better in general because I am willing to take more risk. I am more confident in myself. And that's kind of how I view this Marshall game. I think it's a really good opportunity for Gunnar Stockton and the Georgia offense to build a lot more confidence because you know that you've got more talent on your side. It's not like playing Texas last year or Notre Dame last year. You clearly have the better talent on one side. It's not more scattered out. So I like Georgia to win this game by a comfortable margin.
I think sometimes in the recent past with Georgia, when they are playing teams that they know are better than them, they will downshift a little bit, not throw as many punches, hide some things. I think because of the fact that this is a team they are so clearly better than, Marshall's going to be one of the worst group of 6 teams in college football this year with all that they lost. Charles Huff, now the head coach at Southern Miss. This is a game Georgia, I think, 1, to establish confidence in Gunnar Stockton gets up big early then. And 2, because there are going to be so few opportunities to play younger guys during later on in the season, this is a game where you have to get those guys reps. I think that is something they really regretted in the UMass game where they played with their food a little bit last year and didn't get some of the snaps that they wanted to out of that game. So I think these first 2 games for Georgia, it's huge, yes, to start fast on the offensive side of the ball, but beyond that, get a big enough lead. That way you can play some younger guys. You can get those guys seasoning because once you get into the meat of this SEC schedule, as we're going to talk about, it becomes harder to do that, and you just need to have those guys getting those game reps to develop the depth you need to get through the season.
Yeah, I think that what you said really applies to what we're going to see in game 2 with Austin Peay, because after that, you're immediately going into the SEC schedule, so you're not going to have a lot of time to play a lot of the young guys that are definitely going to need that playing time. Now, because of that, when they release the betting lines, it's going to be some massive spread that Georgia's probably not going to cover. They're going to try to take an early lead so they can have those guys get those reps. So it's just going to be a classic game where Georgia's going to do just enough, but not enough to cover the spread because you're trying to get young guys in there.
Yeah, looking at the schedule, going prediction by prediction, we've both got them at 2-0 in those first games. If Georgia somehow loses to Marshall, Austin Peay, we're having very, very serious discussions and completely changing what we think is possible for this team in 2025.
Now we're going to go ahead and get into the SEC schedule. Of course, that first game on the road at Tennessee. The conversation right now would be so much different if Nico was still the starting quarterback. Tennessee's got a lot of things that they need to figure out. They also lose a lot of key players from their offense. I think it's going to be really tough to replace what Dylan Sampson did for Tennessee, as well as guys on the defense like James Pierce. Now, Georgia's won 8 straight games with a margin of victory of over 14 points. I don't know if it's going to be a 14-point victory. I'm thinking somewhere in the ballpark of maybe 31-20, but it's your first SEC game on the road at Neyland. It might not be pretty, but the Dogs will get it done.
I agree. I think this is a similarly low-scoring game. I think even lower than what you suggested. I think it's like 24-13. I think it's a game where this is going to be Gunnar Stockton in all likelihood's first career road start, and I'll be interested in seeing how he handles that in that regard. So it's a game where, like, even with Nico back, I'd have real questions about Tennessee, given they lose a ton off their offensive line. They lose most of their top receivers. They, as you mentioned, have to replace Dylan Sampson. Now, they have a very good defense coming back, but so often the problem with Tennessee when they've played Georgia is they just can't do anything offensively. And I think that's going to be the issue once again for the Volunteers. So even though that game is at home, it's a 3:30 game instead of a night game. And so I like Georgia here to get another win, to go 3-0 going into that bye week.
So far we've seen eye to eye, and I feel like where we're at in the schedule now is where we could have opinions that start to differ. So let's talk about the big bad wolf that is Alabama, that we now know is going to be a night game in Sanford Stadium. Something about the witchy woman in me tells me that this is going to be like a rain game. It might be gross that day. So I expect this game to be low scoring, not like it was last year when it was an absolute shootout. I think Kirby Smart knows that he has to win this game more than anything because they have been waiting for Alabama to take this trip to Sanford Stadium. But I think what's going to be different about this year is when Georgia played at Alabama last year, I don't think that they exactly knew how talented Ryan Williams was going to be. They're going to have a plan for him this year, and I hope it almost resembles what Georgia did with Kamari Lassiter and Luther Burden, 2 years ago? So
2023.
2023. So I'm hoping that they're going to have a bigger plan for him, but something just tells me it's going to be a low-scoring, gross game. But somehow, some way, and maybe it's just, the Disney dog goggles in me just feels like I need to put all the good energy in the air for Georgia to win this.
So one, I was in college the last time Georgia played Alabama in Sanford Stadium, and those of us that remember that game are not thrilled that you mentioned that it's going to rain for this game, because there was a hurricane that rolled through the southeast that Friday and into that Saturday, and it's maybe the wettest I've ever been. My socks are still wet from that game, and it did not help that Georgia just got its doors blown off that day in a 38-10 game that wasn't even that close. I know you're projecting good vibes. I want those out there in the universe for that game.
Yes.
I can't, in good conscience, pick Georgia to beat Alabama. I need to see them do it. I'm not falling for this trick again. And yes, this game is played at Sanford Stadium, but I would say the last 4 times now that Georgia and Alabama have played, Georgia has had the more talented team, both times in 2021, 2023 SEC championship game, last year's game in Tuscaloosa. Georgia is 1-3 in those games, and it is something mental, in my opinion, at this point. Kirby Smart, I think, is going to have to figure something out and find a way to get this team to win this game, because there's going to be a lot of pressure on them because of the fact that they have lost so many past games. I just, in good conscience, look, I'm going to pick Alabama to win this game. I'm going to pick Alabama the week of this game, because it is a win-win scenario for me. Either Alabama wins and I'm right and I look smart in that sense, or I am wrong and that means that Georgia wins. So I'm just letting you know right now, when the week rolls around and I try and talk myself into Georgia winning this game, because on paper I believe they're the better team, Alabama, I'm going to pick Alabama, and I'm going to stick with Alabama for no logical reason other than this is just what happens when Georgia plays Alabama.
Well, two things on this. I do like that approach that you take, because I remember during Go With The Flow last year, also as the season gets closer, that's something that we will start to do again. I do think that was the win-win situation, because I believe that you were the only person that took Alabama in that case. But I do want to know that I feel like one of the major differences between the teams this year is Alabama's quarterback situation is a little bit different. How do you think that they overcome the lack of experience at that position?
Well, Georgia's not going to have to defend a running back at quarterback like Jalen Milroe did a season ago. You know, they've got Ty Simpson, who seems to be the favorite there. Maybe Austin Mack makes up some ground in fall camp. Keelan Russell is a really interesting name, number one quarterback in the 2025 recruiting cycle. But it's just going to be a very different looking Alabama offense, and it was an Alabama offense a year ago. They didn't run the ball great. And now, you know, Justice Haynes is obviously now at Michigan. They bring back Jam Miller. I'm very interested in seeing what this Alabama offense looks like, especially when on the road last year, not just, you know, the offense necessarily, but the team as a whole really struggled when they played games outside of Alabama. You know, they lose and just look really bad against Vanderbilt the week after that Georgia game. You can maybe chalk that up to you know, not being able to handle that moment. But then end of the season, all they got to do is beat Oklahoma. And that was a very mediocre Oklahoma team. And they get the doors blown off of them in that game on the road. So I will be interested in seeing how this Kalen DeBoer team and how Kalen DeBoer handles playing a game on the road in an SEC stadium, because for as much success as he's had throughout college football, it's very different going in on the SEC on the road. And I think maybe we were willing to overlook that with some of the success that he had at Washington.
And of course, just like last year, both teams have the week off before going into this game. So much time to prepare, but also a lot of time to overthink what happens. But I do know this, that Athens is going to be absolutely insane that weekend. So calling it right now, the rain will happen. It is in the cards. Sorry, not sorry. Let's move on. Let's talk about Kentucky. Georgia has had some absolutely pitiful games against Kentucky, but it's always been at Kentucky when they struggle. When you look at the Kirby Smart era, the history of the score when it's been Kentucky at Samford, 42-13, 21-0, 30-13, 51-13. It just, Georgia struggles when they're in Kroger Field. So I like Georgia to win by a significant margin at home, especially because I am not a Zach Calzada believer for this Kentucky team.
I'm going to make a prediction here. Georgia's going to win this game. Kirby Smart is going to make some comments about the fans not being good enough in this Kentucky game.
Mark it down.
You look at where this game is on the schedule, because it was the same time a year ago where Kirby had questions about the fan base for that Auburn game after that Alabama game. This is a noon start against a Kentucky team that went 3-9 last year. And I know they damn near found a way to beat Georgia when they were up there in Lexington, but this Kentucky team, maybe them and Mississippi State are the two worst teams in the league. And you know, with that Alabama game, if they lose it, I wonder what the fan base mindset's going to be. If they win it, you know, what's the desire to get to the stadium early? I think Georgia's going to win this game, and I think they're going to do so comfortably, just given what we saw and where we have seen this Kentucky program slip for. I think it's very telling that Mark Stoops tried to leave Kentucky 2 years ago to take the Texas A&M job. I think that this is a game Georgia's going to win comfortably, but Kirby Smart's not going to be too happy about what he sees from the fans and the fan support in that game against Kentucky. I can just see it coming a mile away.
I love this take because we've talked so much about how incredible the Georgia home schedule is, and it's because we're talking about Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss. Kentucky, I mean, if the average Georgia fan might not know that this game is at home because we've talked about the big three that are coming into Stanford Stadium. So I love that take about this being the game that Kirby Smart calls out the fans, especially with it being a noon game. Auburn, I'll go through my point on this pretty quick because I think that you're about to make a really fascinating point about Georgia's road game at Auburn, which we know is going to be at night. I'm going to say I think it's going to be probably Georgia's ugliest win of the season. I think Auburn has a really strong freshman class. They bring in a lot from the portal, but they're basically turning over on their offensive line for a new quarterback. Hugh Freeze is looking for that signature win. You could kind of tell at the midway point of last season that he was over it and looking forward to this next year. It's going to be difficult, but for some reason, this is a rivalry where Georgia always seems to come out on top. Of course, this is going to be a really tough game and a really tough environment, but Georgia finds a way to win it, but it might be a touchdown or less than that.
I do think Georgia's going to win this game, in part because I don't think that Hugh Freeze has done a very good job of establishing a winning culture. And mind you, this is an Auburn team last year. They lost at home to Vanderbilt. They lost at home to Arkansas a few years ago. They lost at home to New Mexico State. They've found ways to lose games that they should win against teams they are more talented than. And as much talent as Hugh Freeze has brought in, they are not more talented than Georgia at this point. But Cody, cue up the social clip, whatever you want to play here. The SEC wants Georgia to lose this game. They have set this up, in my opinion, to make this a big game and a big opportunity for Auburn because they love the upsets that college football brings. And Jordan Hare, and Kaylee, you've gotten to cover this league for a little bit now. Jordan Hare, when it is right, is a very special environment. And the SEC hasn't announced a formal game time for this, but it will be a night game. We know that. On top of that, Auburn gets a bye week the week before they play Georgia. That is a huge advantage in my opinion. Even though Georgia is playing Kentucky, one of the worst teams in the SEC, that is a huge advantage in my mind for Auburn in that game. So you get a bye week before playing Georgia. You get a night game at home. The SEC is doing just about everything they can to put Auburn in a position where they can pull this upset and win this game and show that Auburn is a team that can be taken seriously because I believe Auburn's record over the last 4 years is like 22-28. It is not very good. And so they need a marquee win like Georgia so people can go out there and say, see, even a program like Auburn can take down one of the big dogs like Georgia. But I do think Georgia still finds a way to win this game.
Yeah, especially, too, because there's so much more pressure on Auburn in general headed into this year. A win over Georgia takes some of that pressure off, even if you don't have the season that Hugh Freeze is hoping that they were going to have this year. Ole Miss, 2 words, revenge game. This one is so much more personal than it would have been if Georgia would have found a way to win that game. When I think to Ole Miss's game last year, just so many weird series of misfortunate events had to happen for Ole Miss to be able to pull it the win that day. Of course, that was another rain game. You've got probably what's been one of the best quarterbacks that Ole Miss has had and just a team that gelled really well, even though they struggled a lot on the road. It's going to be really personal for the Dogs this year. And for some reason, I feel like this is one of those things where the home advantage does play a role just because of what Kirby Smart was able to do to Lane Kiffin in Sanford Stadium 2 years ago. And we heard Jackson Dart even say the best environment that he's ever played in on the road was at Sanford. So I think because this is a home game, Georgia doesn't have any trouble.
2 words, no expectations. I do not know what to expect from this game. It comes at a really interesting point in the schedule. Georgia it'll be their 4th game fourth SEC game in 4 weeks. And with what we know about Georgia, it's just really hard to play 4 good games in a row. Of Alabama, Kentucky, Auburn, Ole Miss, one of those games Georgia's just not going to play well, and they're going to have to find a way to win. It could well be this game. Austin Simmons looked really good in limited opportunity last year against Georgia. He's almost certainly going to be Ole Miss's starting quarterback. And look, I think Lane knows that this is a chance to make a major statement. The other thing with Ole Miss, their schedule is so weak. They're going to rack up a lot of early season wins, and I don't know how good this Ole Miss team is going to be, even if they come in with, I think, a sterling record like they might be. So I think this is going to be a big game. I think ultimately this is going to be a night game potentially. We don't yet know the game time or TV network for this, but I have no expectations for this game right now. I do think Georgia finds a way to win just because I believe institutionally a little bit more in Georgia than Ole Miss, but it wouldn't shock me if Ole Miss, based on how we saw them manhandle Georgia a season ago, that Ole Miss finds a way to make this a lot more competitive than I think we think right now in June.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about some of the numbers being skewed because I feel like we saw that with Ole Miss and Tennessee at the beginning of this season last year where they were just putting up these big numbers and everybody was like, okay, maybe we've had our eyes on the wrong person. So I think you bring up a good point that maybe coming into this game, the conversations are around it. Make sure you look at the level of competition that Ole Miss has played beforehand. Now we get into rivalry week. Georgia will take a break and then, of course, play Florida on November 1st. Out of all of the rivalries on this schedule that Georgia has consistently come out on top of, the 2 that scare me the most are Florida and Georgia Tech, who we'll talk about later. Georgia needs to be extremely careful when playing Florida. I think that they are going to be one of the most improved offensive teams in the SEC. Of course, DJ Lagway, I think they have a really underrated core group of receivers. I think the only thing that Florida may struggle with is the depth on the defense to be able to keep up with other teams that can be high scores. DJ Lagway has got to stay healthy. I do believe that Georgia comes out with another close win in Jacksonville, but the team that scares me the most is the Florida team that Georgia's going to have to play next year with a third-year DJ Lagway.
We talked earlier about Hugh Freeze and needing a marquee win. I think you could put Billy Napier in that same boat with this Georgia-Florida game. Weird things have happened in this rivalry. There have been times where Georgia's a big favorite and they find a way to lose to mediocre Florida teams. Conversely, Florida has been favored occasionally some of these games and found a way to lose them. Now, that has not really been all that frequent under Kirby Smart. But I think with this Florida game, it's a big opportunity for Billy Napier. But this is the last time this game's going to be in Jacksonville for a couple of years. I think that, as well as Florida played under DJ Lagway a season ago, yes, they won some games, but they were not necessarily dominant in some of those, and a lot of those big wins came at home. So we'll see, away from Griffin Hill Stadium, how that translates. I still like Georgia in this game. I think this is a game where I'll be really interested to see how Gunnar Stockton plays because last year Carson Beck played very poorly in that game in Jacksonville. I think he wanted it too bad. He was very open and honest about that after the game. Stetson Bennett did not always play great in Jacksonville either. So there is something about that game. There is some pressure there on the Georgia quarterback, and I think with DJ Lagway being so hyped as he is, it'll be interesting to see how that reflects on Gunnar and how he plays in this game.
I feel like somebody needs to cue up Olivia Rodrigo Deja Vu because you might be having some deja vu with the conversation that I'm about to give you. I'm a numbers girl. I love statistics. When you look at the home schedule... Oh, wait. Nope. Sorry. We missed Mississippi State. Before we get to the statistics.
Kaylee, overlooking Mississippi State.
I know. Okay, well, I'll say this. Kirby Smart's going to tell you that there are no easy road games in the SEC. And I feel like when you look at the history of Georgia, there's always one, it's supposed to be an easy road game where they kind of play awful and then somehow pull out the win in like a miraculous way like they were supposed to do the entire time. I actually see this game being Mississippi State where Georgia's just going to get a disgusting win and it may be a little bit too close for comfort. And I actually think a big reason for this is the noon kickoff. Like that's kind of a tough trip to make down there in the middle of nowhere. They're going to be having to listen to those cowbells like super early in the morning. They might be still tired from the night before. So Georgia's going to walk away with a win, but I feel like this could be that one ugly road win game.
Disagree. I think Georgia's going to blow them out.
That's fine.
It's important to mention while we say 12 noon kickoff, this is an 11 a.m. Central kickoff there as well. Mississippi State was the worst team in the SEC. They may have been the worst team in the Sun Belt with the level of talent and attrition that they've had in recent years. So they've got a tough road ahead of them. Jeff Levy, the head coach there at Mississippi State, I think that this is a game, we talked earlier about Marshall, the importance of getting up big and getting a chance to get your guys some playing opportunity. This would be a game I would look for Georgia to do something similar in that regard.
Okay, now that Mississippi State has not been overlooked, I promise that was not intentional. It's just the way the pages fell. Deja vu. Statistically, you have 3 humongous home games. You can't walk away undefeated. Jeff says that they can do it. I don't think that they can do it. Your loss comes from potentially Alabama. I don't think it happens with Ole Miss. I'm going to convince myself until the day I die that Georgia slays the dragon in Alabama. So I find myself here once again thinking that the only logical explanation in this thing we call statistics is that Georgia can only win 2 of the 3, and it has to come to Texas. And Connor has rolled his eyes this entire time I've been making my points. So just go ahead and get it over with.
Once again, we were here last summer. It seems like Kaylee said that Georgia was going to lose to Texas. They were going to go in Austin, and little old Georgia was just going to find a way to grind out a game and try and keep it close. I am much more optimistic on Georgia's chances against Texas because of the way that we have seen them win those games last year against them, with the physicality that they brought, the toughness, both physically, I think, in that first game in Austin, and then mentally in that game against Texas in the SEC championship game, where our offense wasn't doing anything in the first half. Carson Beck just shattered his elbow. doesn't matter. We're going to find a way to win this game. And I think that toughness angle is a difference between the Georgia and Texas programs right now. And I think late in the season, knowing this is a game Georgia can't necessarily afford to lose, I think that they're going to bring that toughness angle. I think this is a game that similarly we played at night. And I think this is a chance, especially depending how the Georgia season goes, to be an all-time atmosphere in Athens. It's the first time Texas ever goes to Georgia. And unlike you, where last season I did have Georgia beating Texas in Austin and then again in the SEC championship game, as we sit here right now, I think they're going to get, like you said, 2 of these 3 home games, and I think they're going to get Texas and Ole Miss.
Maybe I'm just taking a page out of your book that I'm just kind of setting myself up for success because either I get the win in terms of the pick or get the win in terms of Georgia takes care of business. So we've got 2 of those on the schedule for us. You've got Charlotte right there after Texas before Georgia Tech, a win, but maybe pretty similar to what we saw from UMass last year, where it's not just this absolute blowout, because regardless of what happens with the Texas game, win or loss, like that's going to be a physically and emotionally exhausting game on them. And to, as much as they say they're not looking ahead, you are already looking to Georgia Tech, especially considering you have one less day to prepare for it. So I'm looking at a big win, but I'm not looking at a big blowout.
I agree. I think the timing of this game, where you know you're going to be in a short week the next week against Georgia Tech, you're coming off that big home game last year. It was Tennessee. This year it's going to be Texas. It's just, I think, going to be hard to maintain the level of edge that you need to get out to a big lead early and sort of coast. And so that's why, the Marshall, Austin Peay, maybe even Mississippi State sort of leans into that a little bit more, whereas with Charlotte, I think that this is a game where Georgia's still going to win comfortably, but like you point out, it's going to feel a little bit like that UMass game last year where they're going to hit on a few plays. Maybe, Georgia offense isn't super crisp to start. Maybe there's a turnover or 2 thrown in there, but ultimately Georgia's going to find a way to win. It just might not be as comfortable as I think everyone would like it to be.
As I mentioned earlier, when I look at the schedule and the rivalries that Georgia has seemed to be on top of in the Kirby Smart era, the other one that worries me a little bit is Georgia Tech, because there is not a single coach nor player that wants to beat Georgia more than Brent Key. I sat in his press conference last year after their tough loss in overtime, and it was like he was watching the game and the results play back in his mind. So I guarantee you that's fueling his fire. I just still don't know if Georgia Tech has the talent at this point in time to be able to compete with what Georgia's got on the other side of the field. And you can agree with me or not, but I actually do think that this game being played on neutral site in Mercedes-Benz Stadium could potentially play to Georgia's advantage just because they have played more there than Georgia Tech has. I just don't know with the result of Texas, like if this game is going to matter that much more with the outcome of what happens. Georgia finds a way to win it, but at some point in time, I don't think it's going to be this year. Georgia Tech will walk away with one.
I agree with a lot of the points that you made there. I think the fact that this game is in Mercedes-Benz, I think helps Georgia a little bit, even though they have not lost to Georgia Tech since 1999 when Brent Key was playing in this game. I think the sterileness of that environment there in Mercedes-Benz probably helps Georgia a little bit more. I do think last year, because of when that game was played and how well Tech played, it was maybe a little bit of a nervous crowd there for Georgia. And look, if they're 10-1 at the end of the year, as I predict them going to be, it's very reasonable to see that they're going to have a loss in this game, especially given how great Haynes King was for them a year ago. He's going to be back. They were really quality backup in Aaron Philo as well, because Haynes King does open himself up to a lot of hits. And so it's a Tech program that I think is trending in the right direction. And as you point out, Kaylee, this game will never mean as much to Georgia as it will to Georgia Tech. Georgia is focused on national championships. We're at a point now where an SEC championship is no longer seen as good enough. For Georgia Tech, this is their Super Bowl. This is their World Cup final. This is their NBA finals. This is something where you even saw this last year with how they used Haynes King during the stretch run of the season. They wanted to make sure he was as healthy as he could be to be the difference maker that he showed he was in that game, managing down the stretch game before NC State. And how that played out. Now, Georgia Tech does not get the same schedule benefit that they did a year ago. They got an extra 2 days of rest compared to Georgia, so that will help Georgia a little bit more. And I think the scare that Georgia Tech rightfully put into Georgia a season ago is going to have this Georgia team's attention a lot more. And so I think in that sense, if Georgia Tech couldn't get it last year, it makes it a little bit harder this year to go out there and get that game.
All right, so just to kind of sum all this up from where we stand, we both think that the team will end up 10-1. The loss for me comes with Texas. The loss for Connor comes with Alabama. But, I mean, You look on here, I feel like we're being pretty optimistic about things. There's a really good chance that this team ends 9-2 with a loss, maybe at one of those road games, or maybe they only win one of the 3 big games at home. But we're being pretty optimistic for the Dogs at 10-1, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them end at 9-2 either. So that's going to be our full predictions for the 2025 schedule. In just a second, we'll go over the most important players from the 2022 class. But first, we want to remind you that here on DawgNation at Large, we are always so excited to partner with Zagoria Law Firm. And what we love about Zagoria Law Firm is that they are the only law firm in the state that specializes in representing people bitten by dogs, as well as those who have been knocked down by dogs. Plus, they can represent you from anywhere in the state, whether you live in Dalton or Valdosta. Zagoria Law can come to you. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, give them a call at 833-GA-DOG-BITE, that's DOGBITE, or check out their website at ZagoriaLaw.com. Now we'll do dog bites. All right, so for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be going through each week class by class, the most important players of their class. So this week we're going to start with 2022. I'm not going to make you guess these because chances are you've already done them at some point, unless you would like to take a guess.
We can try.
Okay. I know what they are. I'm in the position of power.
Yeah. This first one, money, and I'm guessing that's Green. So is this Ernest Green?
This is going to be Ernest Green, who, based on what we saw from the spring, it looks like he's going to be in that right tackle position. Underperformed last year, but this year with a very inexperienced offensive line, there is very little room for error amongst the veterans, and especially when it comes to Ernest Green. So you have to take multiple steps from where you were last year.
Look, I was very wrong about Carson Beck last year. I'm someone that said he was going to have a Joe Burrow type season. I also thought Ernest Green was going to be one of the best offensive tackles in all of college football, and he was decidedly not that. Injuries played a big reason why. He was dealing with a shoulder injury for much of that season and ultimately missed games during the stretch run there. He's moved over to right tackle now. He's got to be, in my opinion, the best player on Georgia's offensive line this year. I know he's not the left tackle anymore. That's going to go to Monroe Freeling, but this is a guy that Georgia needs to be an absolute dominant player on the right side. Obviously, a lot of that is health. When he's been right, like he was in the 2023 season, he has as high a ceiling as anyone. And if he's able to stay healthy, I think he, in particular, maybe more than anyone else, can go a long way in helping fix this Georgia offensive line from where it was a season ago.
Yeah, I mean, even last year, there were some mock drafts that had Ernest Green going in the first round, but I think moving him into this right tackle position is going to maximize his talent and be the best role that he can have in protecting Gunnar Stockton. Next one, do we have the next one? Yeah, this one's
this is an easy one. This is Christian Miller.
Well, Christian Miller, I think, is really important in this class because he can't just be decent. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to be elite, but he's got to be pretty good because he's the oldest guy on the line and honestly a part of the entire defense. Missed the spring due to injury, so he's just important on the physical side of the things as he is in the leadership side of things too.
Yeah, you don't need Christian Miller to be a first-team All-SEC player this year, but I think you do need to see him on either that second or third team if this Georgia defensive line is going to do the things that they need to. They have a lot of questions with this group. It's a very young group. He is the oldest player in this room, which is kind of surprising because it seems like he only just got to college. Yeah. But this is a guy who, again, missed time this spring. I think he's positioned to be a big player this year. We've seen flashes from him. The big question is, can he sustain that? Played a lot of snaps early last year, I think really helping Georgia's defensive line when it was banged up with injuries. Now going into this year, he not only has to be the leader for this group, but also the best player for this group, something he hasn't had to deal with in the past. And how he handles that is going to be really interesting to me.
All right, next one, I'll give it to you. It's Gunnar Stockton.
That's an easy one.
I shouldn't even have to sit here and tell you why Gunnar Stockton is not only the most important person in the 2022 class, but also the entire team.
Yeah, he is going to be Georgia's starting quarterback. And while, yes, Georgia has done more to surround him with talent, he is going to have to be the one that makes those deep throws. And I think that's something he does better than Carson Beck. How he operates the middle of the field, how he does at the line of scrimmage, putting Georgia in situations where they can run the ball a little bit better, I think is the questions that I have for Gunnar entering this season. You can find just about every opinion out there about Gunnar and how he played against Notre Dame. Some people, Paul Feinbaum, think he played pretty poorly. Others actually came away really impressed given the circumstances that he found himself in. So I'm super interested by what we see from Gunnar. I 100% buy into the mental aspect in terms of the juice that he brings to this team. He is a beloved teammate in a way Carson was not, I think, a season ago. And I do think that is going to make a difference for Georgia this year in 2025.
I think the next guy on the list who's going to be Oscar Delp is going to have a special connection on the field with Gunnar Stockton. He admitted to us that he had 1 foot out the door last year. He was already thinking about the next thing. So I think when we get towards the end of the season, we're going to be saying that Oscar Delp took a major leap in not just focus, but also improvement. I believe him and Gunnar Stockton are roommates. So they're going to have a special connection on the field, and I can see him getting a lot more involved as a pass catcher for Gunnar.
Yeah, from the Tennessee game on last year, something clearly changed mentally with Oscar Delp in a great way for Georgia. And obviously he had the 2 touchdowns in that game. I thought he had some really big plays in that Texas SEC championship game that kind of got lost there. Had a touchdown, I believe, against Georgia Tech as well. I don't know if he's going to have more receiving yards than Lawson Lucky, because I think what Lawson does is pretty unique in that regard. But this is a guy that I think is going to set the tone for the Georgia offense. He has championship experience, and he's one of the few guys on this team that actually played a role on that 2022 national championship team. So if this team is going to get to that point, I think Oscar Delp is going to be someone that can potentially shepherd them to that point.
All right, last one, and I told you that I might be the president of his fan club by the time all this is over with, is Dalen Everett. And he's one of the 2022 guys I really feel like we can look back on over the last 3 years and see the visibility of the improvement year after year, and the jump that he made from sophomore to junior season. I'm excited to see what he does from last season to this season. He's also one of, I think, only maybe 3 defensive players that have multiple years of experience. He's not just important to the position group, but also the entire defense.
We talked earlier about Christian Miller saying he doesn't need to be a first-team All-SEC defender. I wonder if Dalen Everett can be the best defensive back in the SEC, if he can be a first-team All-SEC cornerback. He has proven he can show up in big-time games. The 2 Texas games a season ago, he has played, as you pointed out, a ton of football, going to be a third-year starter for Georgia this year. He had made big strides. He's incredibly physical at the line of scrimmage. I think he's gotten better in terms of locating the football downfield. If he is able to be a first-team All-SEC defender, that is, in my mind, going to go a long way with what this Georgia defense might be able to do, and if they can play at an elite level.
Would you be willing to put that on the record in writing that Dalen Everett might be the best quarterback in the SEC?
If you want to be the president of his fan club, I feel like that's something you have to do.
Think
I'm not quite there
maybe,
yet. But
I said maybe. Give me like till SEC
I'm
media
just letting
days to think on
look,
it.
like there's a
I like it.
There's a path to victory there, and if you want to claim it, I've just laid it out for you. I don't know if I'm going to indulge in that, but there is, there's room on Dalen Everett Island to really, I think, become a major shareholder in his success.
I don't know that I want to put all my stock into it just yet, but I want to have my people look over the portfolio first, okay? But I'm headed that way. All right, that's gonna wrap up Dog Bites. With that, we will go ahead and bring in Cody Chaffins for Meme Machine.
Who's that going down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's a Meme Machine and Round Block. It's a Meme Machine and Round Block.
Gang's all here. Hey.
We're all in person, except now I can't be in the room with you guys, but
Your
I'm back here
presence
punching the butt.
Very much felt. All right, I got Connor kicking us off this week.
Yeah, this is a great tweet. Got a lot of engagement over the week. Comes from JP Acosta. Nick Saban should do what Gordon Ramsay does on Kitchen Nightmares, but for struggling CFB programs. Now, I'll point out, real ones out there know that it is not Gordon Ramsay and Kitchen Nightmares, but John Taffer on Bar Rescue. That was the real version of this show. But I would be thrilled to go in and watch Nick Saban just spend like a week at Tennessee, a week at Texas Tech, a week at Arizona State, and just sort of see them and correct them over the course of the week. And then they come back with a black text over the end of it, like recapping how the season and things went. Like Nick Saban came in for the week of the Arkansas game, Notre Dame lost 27-17. Did not help Notre Dame at all that week.
That would be such good television because any small clips that we've seen at Nick Saban at Alabama practice, I mean, a lot of those clips go viral. So if you could get a whole season of it, the ratings through that would be through the roof.
Yeah, I don't need
Saban
Saban
to
on
make
game.
somebody an idiot sandwich,
Yeah.
right? That's the meme we see from Gordon Ramsay all the time.
Yep.
So he's got Josh Heupel. What am I? An idiot sandwich.
All right, Cody.
All right, so mine, because we do so much recruiting, and I feel like this recruiting season, maybe more than any others, people are just so up and down with it. So it says at the top, we talk about players' loyalty. Your average fan just oohing and ahhing over a 5-star recruiter will inevitably decommit versus the senior who put in 4 years of hard work and waited his turn. This whole offseason, we're so enamored with what could be, with what this guy, and it's like, let's take the time to appreciate some of these guys who've been on the a guy like Dalen Everett, who you talked about, who have put the time in, who are going to be these guys who have gotten better in your program and have showed loyalty to the University of Georgia. So there you go. That's for me this week.
I love this. Clock it, Cody.
This might be a good future segment. You know, I see the vision that Cody has with this segment. This might be coming on a DawgNation at Large in the future.
I like that.
I like it.
I'll
All
close
right,
this
Kaylee,
out.
what you got?
So mine has 2 that are a part of it. I'm sure you guys may have talked about this last week, but EA Sports will now pay schools featured in College Football 26 based on how often the teams are used in gameplay. And so the quote tweet says Kennesaw State's going to be in the SEC in no time. I actually love this, and I'm very curious to see what the numbers and statistics are that come out with what teams are receiving the most money or what teams are having the most people use them. So this is a really good chance for Kennesaw State to make some headlines.
I could definitely see that happening.
Even
with
though they
those
fired their
guys,
head
right?
coach.
This does not go well for Kennesaw State.
No, I'm hoping.
I love that.
Let's turn the page.
There's at least one cover where the Owls have made the cover, right?
Yeah, which is a really big deal. I mean, I'm just glad that I'm in a position now to where if I tell people I went to Kennesaw State, they kind of know what it is because of the football game. So that might be one of the better things that's happened to KSU, especially over the last year. So, all right, we're going to do something a little bit different for our fun segment today. May not be everyone's cup of tea, but this is right up mine and Connor's alley because we are both really big fans of the show Survivor. And I feel like no matter what age you are, you've probably seen at least one episode or a little bit of Survivor at some point in your lifetime. And if you haven't, it's outwit, outplay, outlast. You basically want to be the last person left at the end, and you're voted on by all of the people that you play with, and then if you're sent home, eventually you're the one that picks the winner. So it's a game of physical stuff, social stuff, mental stuff, and so it's a really big deal because Survivor's 50th season is just started to film. It's a really big deal. They're bringing a lot of fan favorites and people from former seasons back, and so Connor and I have talked a lot about it, and so we thought it would be cool today if we did 3 people that we thought could win the game of Survivor. We did 1 coach, 1 player, and 1 DawgNation team member. I also would like to throw a wild card pick in there if you could come up with one on the spot. So do you want to get us started with a coach or?
Yes, I'm going to go first with a coach. The important thing with Survivor, Kirby Smart too big of a target.
100%.
Dan Lanning would be too well liked, and he would get sent home, I think, before it is time. You need someone who can play a smart game, play a little bit under the radar, but do enough to get by. Let me go with Mike Elko. Interesting coach from Texas A&M. I think has a high approval rating, but is maybe not the big star that some of those other guys can be. I don't believe he is a villain in the way, say, like an Eli Drinkwitz would possibly be, or a Hugh Freeze. Worked at Duke, worked at Texas A&M. Those are 2 very different cultures in the way you got to manage people and get the most out of those programs. I know he's only entering his 2nd year. Did some nice things year 1 at Texas A&M. They ran out of gas a little bit, and I think that might be a depth-related issue because of the way Jimbo Fisher left that program. I'm a big fan of Mike Elko and what he might be able to do, so I think Elko can play a winning game in Survivor.
I like this, and I'll tell you why. The key to Survivor is you want to be pretty good at everything, but you don't want to be great at everything. You don't want to be too big of a threat, but you also don't want to do not much at all because then they're just going to take you to the end and you're never going to win. I thought long and hard about this, and it was so easy to rule out the people who wouldn't win it, and it finally got me to the point where I believe, and I will stand 10 toes down, that Fran Brown would win
Wow.
Survivor. I think he would play a very Jeremy Collins type game where he would make alliances with the right people, but also at the same time wouldn't disclude the minority alliances. You want to be a part of the majority alliance, and you want to be someone that's helping make the decisions, but isn't telling other people what to do. I think Fran Brown would have good alliances and would be very loyal to the people that he was with, would be a good challenge threat, but not the person who's winning every single challenge to the point where you know you got to vote him out. I fully believe that Fran Brown could win the game of Survivor.
I worry he'd play too great of a social game, and he would know how to manage people too well. He'd know, and he'd be able to, because this is something you sometimes see when you want to start building your resume, is telegraphing, okay, I helped set this up. I can see Fran kind of doing that, especially with the way you look at year one at Syracuse. They got some big wins there over Miami at the end of the year. It's a guy who's gotten a lot of media coverage for a Syracuse program that hasn't done a whole lot. I'm a big Fran Brown supporter. I think whenever Kirby Smart decides he no longer wants to be the head coach of Georgia, I think this is the guy they should call first. But Fran Brown might play too great of a social game, to piggyback off the point you made earlier.
See, I think that you make a good point, but I thought about this, of course, because, what else do I have to do with my time? I think that Fran Brown is the kind of coach who's smart enough to recognize that he needs big targets around him so other people don't see how good he's actually playing the game when you make strong alliances with people like your Kirby Smarts and your Lane Kiffins, and you kind of use them as shields, similar to what Jeremy did with Savage. You guys don't know who these people are, but to Connor, he understands my point. I could go on and on about this. We've got to move on, but I stand 10 toes down behind Fran Brown.
Okay.
All right, give me your player. This one was hard.
This one was hard. I kept it Georgia related.
I did too.
Again, similar mindset. A guy who's proven, but maybe isn't the biggest star in this team. Well liked. I think able to articulate himself to a jury. Give me linebacker C.J. Allen. A year ago I would have picked Jalen Walker. I would have been willing to go out there. Jalen Walker would have fit this perfectly in that regard. A guy, C.J. Allen, again, like Gunnar Stockton would, I think, do really well on Survivor, but he would become too well liked, and that would ultimately be used against him. I think C.J. is able to do a lot of different things for this Georgia team. Well respected, and a guy that I think is going to obviously play a huge role for them this season. But I think someone who has the attributes to do well in the game of Survivor.
I actually found that the player was the toughest one. I also wanted to keep it Georgia related. I initially almost went the route of Brett Thorson, but I think he's almost just too likable to get to that spot. I'm going to go with someone who I'm going to go out on a limb here because we haven't had the chance to hear from them as much as I like. But based on what I know about him from other people, I feel confident in saying I like someone like Chris Cole as a winner because good in challenges. I think he'd be really good at making allies. We saw how quickly him and Justin Williams became friends. But also Chris Cole is really, really intelligent. And I feel like you have to have a certain degree of intelligence to make it all the way and to be able to read into certain social situations. I see him being more as like a quiet warrior that could get his way to the end and then absolutely destroy his jury speech. So I'm going to go with kind of a low-key pick in Chris Cole.
I like that. It's interesting that we both went linebackers.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, some of the offensive guys are a little bit too flashy. They have a little bit too big of personalities. So I definitely think a linebacker kind of fits the mold. Yeah. Now we have our DawgNation team member, and I truly believe there is only one person on this entire staff that could win it, and you're probably in the same headspace as me, and that's our do-it-all utility player. It's Cody Chaffins.
I will say, I would have the most fun watching Brandon Adams play the game of Survivor. I don't think he'd win it. I think he'd Icarus and fly too close to the sun. But you people would be so entertained watching Brandon Adams play the game of Survivor. But the right answer is Cody Chaffins because, again, he fills the behind-the-scenes role for us a lot of the times and does not have a front-facing role. In Survivor, that's a pretty great skill set to have. Can do a lot of things. With all that he does for us, he has to work with a lot of people, so he has a lot of great relationships with people. And because he's not front of the camera as much, I know he obviously does a lot of great work with Mike Griffith and On the Beat. But because he's not front-facing, I think maybe a lot of people say, oh, he might not be that big of a threat. Mm-hmm. And that is going to allow him to sort of slink in and around and his ability to fit in a lot of alliances.
A few things on this. A lot of the times what you see in Survivor is you have... pressure's on.
I was like, I don't watch enough. I watch enough Survivor. My sister is a huge Survivor. She'd give me all the advice I would need.
Yeah.
I am very, very flattered that you guys have said this. So I guess thank you.
Oftentimes what you see with a winner is sometimes who's been a person who's been second in command that's willing to flip on the person that's been making the decisions. I could see Cody being intelligent enough to do that in the game, but when you think about our coworkers, I can't imagine seeing, I mean, Brandon's paranoia
Oh my God,
would be
yeah.
through the roof. Watching him scramble and try to get everybody to either make a move with him, like that would be all-time television. Jeff, just too likable.
Yeah.
Just way too likable.
I'd love to see Jeff's hair on like day 5 and just what that ultimately
Yes.
entails.
I think Mike would get too power hungry. I think he would get a little bit of power and decision making and then just try to make too many big moves.
Why do you think you don't win?
I don't think that I would honestly help that much in physical challenges. I don't know anything about survival skills. So, I mean, I don't know. I think I've got some qualities that would help, but I don't think I have what it takes to win.
I don't think that I would be likable enough. / I think I would rub I would rub the wrong person the wrong way, and that would ultimately get me sent home.
Yeah, and I think I'm one of those people that would get too comfortable and be like, I'm fine, and then I'm the one that's blindsided.
Yeah.
So, but I think the goal of everybody, like the one thing you want to do in Survivor, is find the hidden immunity idol. So I think I would immediately go looking for that and maybe get caught, and maybe that's where my game goes wrong. Wow. Okay. Sorry if you've never watched Survivor, if you've never cared about it. This is a great time to start. It really is. It's a show of human nature, and you learn a lot about how people are when they're put in an environment where they have to not only survive but be social. So a good time to start watching would be Survivor 50. That's going to be coming out here in a little bit. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I don't. Shout out to Cody, our wonderful behind-the-scenes producer, someone who I think would excel on Survivor.
Yeah, maybe could we submit an application for him? Would that work? We'll cover your shifts for the time being.
We just
my way to the top.
We just edit in clips of him that he has had on various DawgNation shows over the years.
Hey, and the winner gets $1 million. Imagine what you could do with that. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Connor Riley. We'll see you right back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock here on DawgNation at Large.